Chronic Illness Therapist podcast. This is meant to be a place where people with chronic illnesses can come to feel heard, seen, and safe while listening to mental health therapists and other medical professionals talk about the realities of treating difficult conditions. This might be a new concept for you, one in which you never have to worry about someone inferring that it's all in your head. We dive deep into the human side of treating complex medical conditions and help you find professionals that leave you feeling hopeful for the future. I hope you love what you learn here, and please consider leaving a review or sharing this podcast with someone you love. Are just kind of looking to learn the basics of acceptance work. What does it mean, and what skills can help you kind of lean into acceptance? You know, we talk a lot about acceptance on this podcast and what it is and what it isn't. So I won't repeat that all here. But if you'd like to sign up for this membership, I'm still kind of figuring out exactly what it's going to entail, but I know it will at least have videos, training videos, and a transcription with each video, as well as like some worksheets when applicable. And eventually the goal is to have a community where, you know, people can chat with each other and kind of like a Facebook group, but I don't think it'll be on Facebook. I think it'll be on a different platform. So I'll keep you updated on that. If you're interested in learning more about that as I learn more about it and exactly, you know, what it's going to be, then sign up for the email list, and the link will be in the show notes. And yeah, I won't spam you with lots of emails, but just updates about what's going on in the membership and what it all entails. So thanks. Zara Dropkin is a licensed clinical social worker with a master's in art therapy. She has past experience working with folks with dementia, older adults, veterans, folks with serious mental illness and trauma, and chronic pain. She's worked in inpatient settings and outpatient settings, group practices, and now runs her own practice offering art therapy, EMDR, and traditional talk therapy for teens and adults. Her clients predominantly present with trauma, chronic pain, and issues around identity and self-esteem, and her work is strongly rooted in mindfulness, narrative-based work, ecotherapy, art therapy, and social justice. Her framework is very LGBTQIA affirming, trauma-informed, and strengths-based. In addition to her private practice work, she also partners with nonprofits and local schools and has led groups at a chronic pain clinic. She also co-leads a chronic pain support group with a colleague and a friend who's a yoga therapist. Zara was on episode 2 of this podcast, and it was a really popular episode, and I think this episode is going to be a top-ranking one as well. It was definitely one of my favorites. So I hope you'll enjoy this episode about ecotherapy and how it connects us to our body, especially as folks living with chronic pain. So Zara was on my podcast on episode 2, and people loved that episode. It was Imperfectly Perfect, How Art Therapy Helps People with Chronic Pain and Perfectionism. And so if you haven't heard that one, definitely give that one a listen. We talked about art therapy and how that just, I'm going to let Zara tell me because she's the art therapist and can explain much better, but I find it really fascinating how there's so many different types of therapy. And I think it's really important that you find something that resonates with you personally. And the research shows us that too, right? It's not even about what you're doing. It's about one, who you're doing it with, and if what you're doing, if you like it and enjoy it. So today we're bringing in ecotherapy. I would love to know, Zara, can you just give a recap again of like art therapy, ecotherapy, and maybe even a little bit of, have you been shifting into this space recently? And if so, or have you always been doing it? Kind of give me a history of that.
Absolutely. So, and actually even more specifically, like eco art therapy is something that I do a lot of. So pulling back just to like art therapy. So I always explain art therapy as twofold. So there's art as therapy, just the act of creating can be therapeutic, you know, drawing in with mandalas or coloring in. And these are things that just have the innate capacity for calming ourselves, releasing things, creating containment. And then there's like art psychotherapy. And that is the way that, you know, sometimes they say images speak louder than words, or oftentimes we're working with clients and they're like, I just don't have the words for this. And so oftentimes that's that invitation of like, can you show me it? right? Can you show me what it looks like? Or even just this feeling that you can't even contain, or whatever it might be, of like, what does that look like? So it allows people to express themselves maybe where words can't take you, or allows you to express things that aren't even on your conscious awareness. Because so much of art making is through metaphors and symbols. And so in creating, the process of creating and the final product, a lot of things are uncovered that maybe we don't actually have cognitive awareness of in at the beginning of the process. And it's like a very process based thing, so we're not focusing on the end product so much. It's like the journey that gets you there. And so yeah, that's just a very broad overview of art therapy. There's a lot of different ways to engage with it. I don't look at an artwork and like make a diagnosis or say all these things. Like, the meaning of the artwork, the client makes the meaning of the artwork. We understand it together and we dialogue with the image together. And sometimes that dialoguing with the image creates new images, or we alter that image. And so it also becomes like the canvas for change, or the facilitator for it. And so that's a little overview of just what art therapy is. And then ecotherapy is kind of pulling back and thinking about being able to connect our own personal ecosystems to a larger ecosystem. And so how like nature has the innate capacity for healing and for like restorative powers, as well as like us having that innate capacity within ourselves. And so being able to connect deeper on that way. And then there's also just the piece, like I was saying before, art is innately therapeutic. Nature is innately therapeutic, right? Being in blue spaces, being in green spaces. There's all this science and research about how that just has healing effects for our body. Earthing, right? Bare feet on the ground, and we're like getting the charge from the earth. That does great things for our body. Movement does great things for our body and our nervous system. And so there's the ways that just being in nature has all of those healing benefits, and then creating with nature and with found materials has so much that it can really just bring to light, allow you to like see or connect with. I think a lot of art therapy is like there's a lot of nature symbolism, and so being able to actually be in nature and use that is fantastic. It also, like, one of the things I've talked about, I think a little bit last time, I do EMDR. And Francine Shapiro, like when she created EMDR, it was actually because she was like walking on a path, and she was like noticing as she's looking back and forth while she's on this trail, that those eye movements were and like doing something different in how she was reprocessing these traumatic memories. And so there's a lot of ways to be able to use nature as a therapeutic element. And for me, like why I started bringing it in, nature has been my therapy, right? Art and nature have been probably the most therapeutic things for me as I've taken care of myself over the years and healed and worked on healing. And then during the pandemic, I started to be able to offer nature sessions to clients. Before that, I would lead some groups out in nature, and I really loved that time, but it was always so hard to figure out all the logistics of it. And so during the pandemic, we are no longer able to meet with folks in person in the office. I live right by Redwood Regional, right by all these amazing trails and absolutely stunning nature. I'm like looking out my window as I'm saying this, and these pretty trees, right? And so there's so much, right? Like driving distance and not even driving distance, right? Ecotherapy doesn't even need to be like in big, forests. It could be at a local park. It could be literally just walking along the street. I would do walk and talk sessions with clients, and we would be talking about something that's very dysregulating, and then you like feel the wind, right? And all of a sudden that like those being able to connect to those senses while still in the midst of something internal gives us something different and allows us to be able to not be totally consumed in the dysregulation, and something that's kind of grounding you in the present. So that's like a little bit of ecotherapy. Sorry, I'm going on a whole thing.
No,
Last part, eco art therapy. And eco art therapy is like using nature as the materials and creating in nature, creating about nature. A lot of things that I'll do with folks is, like I've done like body mapping with found materials. So we're collecting, trees, sticks, flowers, all this stuff. And then we're doing body mapping, which is showing me where you feel different things in your body. And we start to connect to that mind body awareness. Or nature mandalas is a huge thing I integrate for folks, because that also allows us to practice letting go, right? Letting go of attachment. We create something out of found materials and we leave it on the nature's ground, and it will ultimately, wind will come, animals will come, and it will not stay in its final form. And so we get to practice letting go. And so oftentimes when I'm doing grief work with folks, we're making nature mandalas, kind of remembering the person or remembering the animal or remembering whatever it is, and then letting ourselves kind of figure out how to let it go and go back to nature, right? And become something else again. And so how to use these amazing lessons that nature can offer us, create around it, and connect to it.
Yeah, I really like how you went into the whole letting it go concept. I feel like even using like progressive muscle relaxation, like, because we say these things in therapy, like learn to let it go or learn to sit with your feelings, and it's like, what does that mean? Like, I know clients get really frustrated. I see memes all the time too on Instagram, like, therapist said this, but okay, but how?
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
It's a perfect practice where you're like, oh, I'm actually seeing what that feels like and I'm experiencing it. And it's hard for me to walk away from it, or it's hard for me to see it when it's been a little bit messed up. And like, what is that bringing up for me? And then that's content for therapy, right? And so, of course, that's something that's so much easier said than done. Like, practice like holding your feeling or letting go or things like that. And so how to have these little in vivo practices that you get to maybe just notice and explore will help you start to kind of learn those ways of connecting to it.
yeah, nature has so much to teach us. I think that, like, in our modern day society, don't get me wrong, I love all of our modern conveniences, and I love owning a home, and I love the stability that comes with, being in one place. But it also, we get too comfortable and too just still. Too not still is probably the wrong word, but we stay stuck. Like, by staying in the same place, our home is the only place we live our life, or we're always on the run from like going different places, but not really like stopping to see what's in our surrounding. We're either like on the go or we're like vegging out, couch potato mode. Nature, I just think it gives you it all naturally happens. You can't change nature. You can't force it to do anything it doesn't want to do. And when we do in our society, we reap the havoc of it later. So
Yeah. Well, and I mean, nature is like the most amazing model of change, right? We've got our change of seasons, we've got the life process, the life cycle, like all of this stuff that we normalize and accept in nature is like something that we sometimes really struggle with as humans. And so how to be able, like I've got one of my tattoos is a ginkgo tree or like ginkgo leaves, because in the fall it's like this beautiful, you get to see all these beautiful ginkgo leaves on the ground, and it's so gorgeous. And it is just this like, oh, look, there's a lot of beauty in letting go. And that reminder of it that I get to see in nature and sometimes maybe struggle psychologically with. And so I think it offers a lot of wisdom to us.
yeah, I'm trying to remember now, like sunsets are literally made up of like dust and like really like kind of dirty things in the air. That's how you get like
Wow.
these
Yeah,
beautiful sunsets.
that's
Um,
amazing.
yeah. And it's true. I mean, it reminds me of like no mud, no lotus, these beautiful flowers that literally only grow in mud. And I think it's really easy to say these things, but then when you're in it, when you're in the midst of like a crisis or trying to figure out what's next in your life or going through grief, we just so badly want to hold on to what we know. And again, it's not to like throw everything out about the way that we currently manage things. There's, we need comfort and familiarity, and those things are really helpful, but we do kind of get stuck there and just unable to let things move on the way that they're supposed to.
Yeah, I think that's something that always happens and is really helpful to notice and connect to in nature. And then I also think like there's just so many ways that there's things that we get really fixed in as humans. And like, for instance, right, stuff that we talked about in our last interview, the perfectionism, right? We get really fixated on perfectionism as humans. And in nature, we really appreciate things that are imperfect, right? We love those funky trees, or I love those funky trees that are like wrinkled and have like all these little scars and like all this other stuff. And yet, like, as a human with an imperfect body, I've got a different narrative about that. And I've had to work a lot about untangling from that. And so there's these ways that there's so much beautiful modeling in nature. And consistently I work with so many folks with chronic pain. Nature is like, the reverence for nature is like such a powerful support or resource for a lot of the clients I work with. And so I think I was just seeing more and more and more of that. And so it was like, okay, then this is something we can't turn away from, and we have it right here. So it's been a big part of my practice recently. And ultimately, like, I'm working towards one day of purely nature, a few days in the office, some video, some in person, and then just one like only nature sessions.
Yeah. So what do those look like for you? You're over by the redwoods.
I mean, it depends on the client and what we're kind of working on and stuff like that. Sometimes it is like we are just walking through the redwoods and we're talking kind of like we would if we were sitting in the office and working on a session, or it's art making in nature. And so we bring out a blanket and we bring some art materials, and then we use nature's materials and we're creating stuff in nature. Sometimes there's like a specific kind of like goal in the session. And so we'll kind of go and work with that. And then I've been also leading most recently I led a retreat in nature where it was, around expressive arts, and, it was around reclaiming our body stories and just using, like rooting into our body stories. And so there was a lot of metaphors around root systems and trees and stuff like that to help folks understand their own selves almost as like different types of trees, and how to root into our stories that offer us empowerment, not just problem saturated ones.
Yeah. I think we're fed so many stories about how our bodies are supposed to work. And even like, if you just eat this way, or if you just exercise, or if you just do this thing, like you're going to be pain-free, cancer-free, illness-free, whatever it is. And look, it's not to deny that our bodies need nutritious food and movement. We do. That's actually a part of the problem. The problem is then we want to like make it into this scientific model that says like, this is the exact way. And when you look at nature, I mean, you talk about the wrangled trees, those trees are thriving, and they have just like moved along whatever obstacles were in their way, and they just grew around it.
Yeah.
It's literally how we are supposed to look. But we
Yes.
think we're supposed to look like this straight, perfect thing.
Right. Yeah. I think, it does help us untangle from these ways that we get stuck in, or feel like there's only way of doing or being, right? These shoulds, and then to be able to see so much diversity in shape, size, and appreciate all of it and not have judgments about it is really good for us who maybe struggle with some of that. Yeah, there's so much I can say about all of this, so I'm, I'm gonna rein in and let you ask me questions.
Yeah, no, I know it makes your brain go a million miles a minute.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, it's something that I'm like so excited and passionate about. And I think, I mean, again, so much of it comes from like, for me, no matter how bad my pain is, if I get outside and I can connect to like the warmth of my sun or the big trees that are growing or the waves crashing and rolling in and out, like all of that stuff, like gives me like something that is just, again, innately healing, innately calming, innately cathartic in some way or another. And so being able to be close to nature is like part of my pain management plan, right? Like that is fundamental for me. And it's something that I not only like I'm passionate about as a clinician, but like live very deeply.
Yeah, I think looking at it as a form of pain management, I know that I have definitely clients, friends, and people I've seen say things online, like lots of backlash against the concepts of the ideas of like going for a walk. And I think it's just how it's presented. It's presented as this way of like, if you just went for a walk, you would not feel this thing anymore.
Nope.
When actually, like, really the advice shouldn't, no one should be telling you to just go for a walk. The only people who should be telling you to go for a walk are the people who are willing to walk with you.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
So let's go for a walk together, learn how to be flexible together. That's really what I'm hearing you say is nature teaches you how to be flexible. It teaches you how to be the tree that can bend in the wind and not break.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's never a like, this will just make it go away, right? Just go for a walk if that's what it is. And just exercise and just, you know, like all these different things that are prescribed that don't actually get it. But I think there's like, you know, if someone's willing to go on that walk with you, or if you're able to go on that walk and then connect to the feeling, right? And then be able, because I think what the other thing in it is like, again, the movement piece, and also just the like, for me, like, you know, being among the big trees, I can take a deeper breath, right? Like there's something that I notice in my body, like I can take my breath from my chest into my diaphragm, right? And so like it's innately calming for your nervous system. So we're going to be able to talk about or connect to our feeling in a clearer way rather than a reactive way.
Yes, exactly. That flexibility to be able to handle the emotion, react to it in a way that feels good to us. 'Cause a lot
Yes.
of times we're trying to do all these things that people have told us to do, and it's very rigid and prescribed. And then we have all this guilt and shame that we couldn't do it that way. Now we're reacting really poorly to the people around us. They're
Right.
reacting really poorly to us. It affects our relationships. It affects everything, our whole entire life, our lives. It's relationships, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Nature. It's so hard when you do live in a city.
Hmm.
And I know, so obviously the most of your work your work is in the state that you're in, California. So, right, you've got that access, but do you have any tips or do you work with people who maybe are virtually, who are in a city, and what tips would you have for people?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you are working with, even you could do eco art therapy without being in nature, but just kind of like at my house, I have a collection of like rocks that I've collected from different things, or like leaves, like dried leaves or different things like that. So you can just still work with found materials in nature from times that you are there. Or even if you're in an urban setting, right? Like it's like local parks, right? Like even though they're not like an abundant space of nature, like green, right? That's fantastic. It also, like for me, I don't always get to go out to the redwoods every single morning. Once I get there, I will be super stoked in my life, but I'm not there yet, right? And so then I just go on neighborhood strolls, and neighborhood strolls, there's like a certain tree on the sidewalk that I'm really drawn to, or this cactus that's flowering, right? And like these are little things in nature in an urban setting that are right here in front of me. And I don't need to go very far out. Or if you've got a little porch, like maybe you're planting something, right? Like that's something. Or on your like, windowsill, whatever it is, that's still finding these ways to connect to nature and in the ways that you can.
Yeah. It's as you were talking, what came up for me was my little sun porch that I have. And I love to be out there. I will say though, recently I haven't been finding as much peace in it. And it's like almost like it's not big enough. It's not like immersive enough. I live on a main road in Atlanta. My backyard, like if you just saw a picture of it, it looks like I live in the middle of the woods, but I definitely don't. So I have this like I do have this spot.
Yeah.
But sometimes it feels really restricting too. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's probably like there's some stuff in there that has content to explore, right? Like that, I think even just like connecting to the parts that are there and then feeling like limited within it, right? And then like, okay, what's that about? Right. And so I think that like there is something that's interesting in that. And like I think there's like, okay, my front porch has got this, and my back porch has got this sense of like I live in the middle of the woods and I want more. And also when I can't get more, how do I like connect to what is here? The other thing that, oh, just going back to even like your front porch piece, the idea of, and this is one element of like ecotherapy, right? Like gardening. People talk about this being, I'm not a great gardener, so like this isn't necessarily my experience, but I have a lot of folks I work with that like, what is this thing that grounds you? Literally putting my hands in the earth, right? Like
Mm.
that is so grounding for people. And that again is this way of connecting to one practice of ecotherapy.
Yeah, I love in to go along with what we're talking about. Like I recently have just over the last year, I'm like, okay, I swear I'm gonna learn how to keep a plant alive because this is all I have here in the city. But it's interesting as some of the plants that I have are growing and like they don't grow symmetrically. Like they grow so however they want to. And I've been drawn lately to things that just aren't symmetrical. And I just think, or things that are circular instead of four pointed edges, which where in nature do you find 90-degree angles?
Oh,
It,
it's all
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So just trying to bring those pieces into my home and to look for them out in nature too, to remind myself like the world is rigidity is just such a construct. We don't need it. We don't, in fact, it's harmful in so many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, and there's like an image I've seen, and I don't know who the artist is, and I'm sure there's like so many different variations of it, but it's essentially like capturing this like there is no one way to grow, and it shows like a handful of different plants, right? One plant has got really deep roots, but like nothing budding out, right? Another one has got this huge flower, but very shallow roots. Another one is like, in its growing process, right? And so all of them are growing, but in very different ways. And so we can get fixed into like, this is what progress looks like, or this is what growth looks like. And yet, if we connect to just how growth looks in nature to ourselves, like change and growth look so different for each body. And that's exactly how it should be.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think we need all the reminders we can get that like change is normal and go having setbacks even that's a huge thing that comes up a lot in work with chronic pain and chronic illness. I'm this is a setback. But a
Yeah.
setback from what?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you set back from?
Totally. And I think again, if we're going back to thinking about like season changes, right? Like growth is not linear, because if we think about like, a tree through a season, right? Like it is constantly growing, and yet at some point like it's going to not have its leaves, or flowers or whatever it might be, but that actually doesn't mean it's not growing anymore.
Yeah, it needs that rest, it needs that break. And another thing comes to mind around like rigidity and perfection and change and growth. just even the way we plant in modern day society and how it causes, I've learned this from Braiding Sweetgrass. Have you read that book?
I did. It's gorgeous.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful. And so, the fact that we have like diseases in our livestock or different diseases in our plants, and when you plant things indigenously the way that they used to before we all got here and ruined everything, there that didn't exist. And if something was ruined, that was just that was the end of it, and that was supposed to happen. Like, and then there was wisdom in the tribe and in the community to know when to move on and where to move on and how to do it.
Right.
I think a big part of this too is like when things end for us, we have such a culture of like toxic independence that there isn't we often don't have a community to help us with the fresh start.
Yeah.
So an end to something feels like just this impossible, "Well, how do I move on from this?" Because there's there's no communal sense of support that kind of, who to go to.
Right, right. Or that it's okay, right? That like, because I really do think, like, I remember I had this experience where I was like, oh, I feel like I'm gaining so much wisdom around grief and loss. And it was because I've like had this very deep connection with this one tree. I tend to like, there's like certain trees that I can feel a very deep connection with. And I remember like there's this one tree that I found on one hike once, and it was like I loved this tree. And I would, every time I would go on a hike, I would like specifically go on the hikes on this trail so I could go like cut off the trail and go to that tree. And I remember I went to go see that tree one time and it had fallen over. And it was so interesting because in the way that like I have grieved loved ones that have passed away, or I have grieved other things, like it hit me very differently, where it was like I like saw that it had fallen, and it was like there was sadness, and there was also just a like, this is the process, right? Like it is actually just returning right back to the earth, and there's this gorgeous tree growing right next to it, and it going into that earth is just going to fuel that next tree. And there's something really beautiful in just like that ending happened, but it like, and its roots will, kind of be in the earth for a long time. It's like all these things will kind of still be in the earth and then create something new, right? It's not gone forever in that way. It's like something in it is going forward to the next thing. And there's like something really that I was like, I felt such an acceptance in it. And I remember I like pulled back and I like created a lot of art about it, because I was like, wow, like this feels like how to move through grief and change, and like what can I learn from that, what can I pull forward from that, because I just saw it modeled so beautifully in nature.
How long would you say it took you to get to a place, or can you just speak to the journey of getting to a place where like to even pick out a favorite tree, like especially if someone's just kind of starting out with any of this kind of, how do
Totally.
you even, what does that journey look like?
Yeah, I mean, what I often do with folks where we're like starting an ecotherapy session, or if I'm doing a group or something, it'll be like, hey, we're on this land. Let's first of all just kind of connect to the land that we're on, gives you me, right? Like all these different things. And then it's like walk around for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and find something in nature that pulls you. It is. If it's like just the way that the light is coming through the trees, if it's the plant coming out of the rock, and just find something in nature that kind of pulls your attention in, for some reason you connect to, and then meditate with that, right? Like, what is it in that thing in nature that you connected to? So, I'm walking and all of a sudden I'm like really drawn to like a plant coming through the rock, and it's like the teeniest tiniest plant, but like wow, it's coming through the rock, and like that looks so hard, and right now I feel like I'm in a really hard place. Or I'm noticing like the light coming through the branches up there, and right now everything feels really dark, and so I'm really connected to that lightness, right? And so that's just this way of like starting to get them to create that connection, and that way to connect through those metaphors, to connect through something in nature, and that becomes like an anchor or an access point. And so like trees are something for me. trees may not be everyone's thing, right? And so like I wouldn't say like go find your tree. There's a really great tree like narrative therapy exercise, the tree of life exercise that like I can offer folks as if we want to work in like the tree framework. But I think that, you know, it might be something else in nature for each person. And so to let them know that like they find what works for them and they connect to that.
It sounds like it would need a lot of, you would either naturally have to be a curious person or build that curiosity muscle.
Yeah, and willingness, right? And so I, you know, I think it's again like just starting where the person is at. You know, some people might already have a huge language and connection with nature, a language for and connection with, and other people may be like, I don't leave my house, right? And so let's start on a walk, and on the walk just start to notice what it feels like when the wind comes, or notice what it feels like when you hear the sounds of the wind, and just finding ways to connect like that and then building it. And so, you know, again, it's just starting with whatever awareness or practice that is already there, and letting them start to build what feels good for them.
Yeah. It's so hard to know sometimes what feels good for you when you when you live in a chronically ill body. But I think this practice is, and it just like nature, right? One isn't causing the other thing to happen. It's reciprocal.
Yeah.
You go into, if you're choosing art therapy, ecotherapy, you're deciding to go into it, then you are experiencing it. Maybe that in and of itself helps build some curiosity and some willingness. And then you have to additionally choose to be more curious and more willing, and then you go back into, and so it's just it's back and forth.
Back and forth, right? And I think it's never something that's going to like make everything go away or make you feel 100% better or anything like that. But what I think it does for me and for a lot of people I work with is it allows the and. Like I'm a big like and is a big word I use, right? Like I can feel pain and gratitude for living in such a beautiful place. And if I'm sitting in my bed at the same time, all I'm feeling is pain and misery, right? And so like it really opens the space for the and that's something that I think is really powerful about it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. What else comes to mind around your work with ecotherapy and clients with chronic pain, chronic illness?
I think there's something also in helping folks kind of connect to, I mean, right, the elements, nature, and the things, even just in kind of learning from and connecting to the different elements through, so maybe like tears, right? We're learning like releases and water, right? The element of water, and we connect the ways that we have those types of releases and stuff like that. It could be through fire, and we can think about the ways we're alchemizing things. It could be through earth, right? And like the grounding that we can get from that. It could be going to the top of the mountain and getting like perspective, and going back to like the elements like air, right? And thinking about breath and the ways that we can use breath. You know, I just think that there's so many little places that we can use nature as kind of a tool to teach and to practice the things that we're bringing into therapy. And so helping folks like again kind of find the ways to like connect to themselves, connecting to something bigger. That's something that I think is really, really helpful, because I think, you know, we are our own bodies in a larger body of the earth, of, you know, community, of all these different things. And so when we are just seeing ourselves as only an internal system, not connected to a larger system, it has a lot of flaws, and so we really need to find the ways to connect our internal system, our nervous system, to this larger ecosystem of the world that we're existing in and with. And I think again, just going back to the piece of, you know, our nervous system in natural spaces, that being something that has some is not to be undervalued at all, right? Like I said, I remember during the pandemic, I would go for, my friend and I, we ended up calling them rage walks, but then they became rage and joy walks, because like there was this hill we would have to walk up, and it was like 2020, so we would be like walking up the hill venting about whatever there is to vent about, the world, and then you get to the top and we would cut into this park, and this park had redwood trees and eucalyptus tree and water. And I remember every time we would get to the top and dip into that park, I would feel my breath deepen, and then I would just feel peace for a moment. And so it became this like rage and joy walk. And then it was like rage and all the feels walk, because like it was this way that I could connect to so many different feelings. And something else that I have heard clients say and I really loved is like there's such expansiveness in earth. So like the sky, we can give some of our connect like the pain in our body and give it to the sky, right? Like give it up, give it, and to connect in, right? And like different ways to be able to use just the expansiveness in this like natural world to not feel so alone. Something that I've created a lot of art about and I have connected to personally, and I've heard a lot of my clients connect to, is like nature holds us in whatever state we're in. Like if we are crying, nature is still going to hold us. If we are screaming, nature will still hold us. If we are, like whatever it is, nature still holds us. And so just being able to feel that embrace of like nature, and that just like we can be on a stormy beach and watching the waves crashing, and it's like, oh look, like the ocean feels anger too, and the ocean gets calm, right? Like it gets to that place. The ocean doesn't always stay in that state. I mean, there's so many riding the wave metaphors and, DBT or different approaches to therapy that have a lot to offer folks.
Yeah.
I went on so many different things just then.
Well, I love it. Always trying to decide how personal to get in my public life too. But you were mentioning just, so I really like the concept of like connecting to something bigger than yourself, which has been said a lot, but the way that you described it kind of just, I guess I was able to imagine, one, the nervous system, which is inside of my body, right? If you think about, and then your skin makes up the outside of your body. So there's the nervous system within the whole system of my body within the system of this earth and all the nature around. And then even the fact that we call it Mother Earth, and I'm thinking of mother. So I'm working with a new therapist who's she herself is not a dance and movement therapist, but she has had a lot of training like in that area. And it's just been so fascinating to try to learn how to move my body again. And there's still so much resistance, even with myself, as this is something that I genuinely want to do. Like I sought this out. I sought out a specific therapist for this thing, and it is so hard. But then the concept of you like talking about nature holding you, and she hadn't said it in quite those words, my therapist, but just she's talked with me a lot about like how a mother holds their baby, and like when you're young, the baby, the caregiver is that's the whole world. Like the arms of the caregiver are the baby's entire world. And that's all it knows. And it's called Circles of Support. And you guys I'll put the link down below, but Dee Wagner in Atlanta, she has like a really cool not worksheet, but infographic about this. But yeah, so like the baby, the mother's arms are what hold this baby, and the baby needs the mother to be strong enough to hold all of its emotions and its needs. And then it grows older. And it doesn't, in that circle, the circle of support just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger as the child gets more self-sufficient, but we still need what's around us. So then I don't know if I'm coherently explaining everything I'm processing as you're talking, but it's just the idea of what holds you. What is your level of, what provides enough support for you?
Yeah. And as you, sorry, go.
The last thing I was just going to say about that is like, if nature feels too big for you currently, then you might not be at that level yet. Or maybe there's another part of nature, like maybe standing by the ocean and feeling that small feels way too scary. Maybe that is not for you at this moment. And yeah, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that's an absolute great point, right? And so that again is like, okay, then I get to go for the walk and just notice like the plants that I'm attracted to, or the colors I'm attracted to, or maybe like standing in front of the big ocean is too much. How does it feel to be next to a pond? And how does it feel to just look at a bowl of water and connecting to like water in that way? Or how does it feel to look at one plant and just again to maybe kind of find the ways to like meet yourself where you're at, notice what comes up, right? Like, does feeling that small feel really dysregulating? Like, okay, then like let's take that information, we can explore that information because that's giving a lot of information, but let's also see what are the spaces that your body feels a little calmer in. What are the spaces that your body feels like you can take a deeper breath in, and what does that look like? So I think that's a really great point. I think, yeah, one of the things that has been really beautiful that has unfolded and was the premise of the retreat I ended up leading was, I have a dear friend who's an amazing poet. Her name's Pam, and we ended up kind of sharing art back and forth, and she was like, writing these beautiful poems, and I was like, wow, when I read your poems, I see them in images. Like that's how I read, is through images almost in my head, making sense of it. And she's like, oh, I'd be really curious to see if there's response art. And as I was reading her poems, I was like, oh, I've made a lot of similar art on my own about my own self that have so many of the same themes. And we were both using nature as these like sources to be able to communicate and express our experiences with very different kind of experiences, pain and trauma or mental health issues, and yet like again finding this anchor through it all. And one of the images, so we actually made like a zine called Earth Bodies, and our retreat was like, our Earth Bodies retreat of kind of how do we all in our own little bodies on this earth, our own little earth bodies, find our ways to connect to our body among all these other bodies, all these other earth bodies on this body of earth. And one of the images that was on the front was this piece of, these hands coming out of, so it was kind of like these root systems from the earth. And the roots kind of almost become trees that are like these hands that were holding a body that was in child's pose or a fetal position. And just again, this idea of like, we all kind of have that connection, but it looks maybe a little bit different for all of us. And so how to help each body connect to their own ways of being able to connect to this earth body and then to all the other bodies that are also on this earth.
Yeah, it's obviously incredibly complex, especially when you live in a society that like just thrives off this idea of, thrive is the wrong word, but like this idea that it's A, B, C, D and linear. And like, if you just do this thing this way, it will work out. And I think the connection that you're talking about, I mean, even I think with some other types of therapies, like it is very like DBT is highly focused on like social skills, but it can become really prescriptive and rigid and feel, at least the clients who come to me who have a history with DBT or CBT are looking for something. And granted, other people find immense help with CBT, DBT, any type of therapy is going to be helpful if you connect to it. But I think there's just so the people who find me are looking to connect to something that maybe their brains are trained to look at, like, here's a manual for this thing. So they think they're looking for that. And then they get in it and they're like, why do I still feel this way though?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think nature does a really good job at just helping you, accept and let go.
Well, and remember, there's so many different ways for it to look, and that's okay, right? Like, I think same thing for me as an art therapist, as someone that does EMDR. Like, people come to me after having tried so many different therapists and so many different modalities, and I'm still not getting better, right? Like, that's that narrative, and so instead to kind of be able to be like, it's not that you're doing something wrong, it's not that you're not okay, right? We just want to find the thing that works for you. And what does like work look like? Because there is no way work looks like, and there's no one way that getting there should look.
Essentially, it's the co-creation.
Yes. Yes.
If you're not creating with like a guide, I wanted to give that, okay, I'll just say this sentence first. If you're not creating your own narratives and life, it is always going to feel like rigid and restrictive. With that being said, that does not mean we should not be doing it on our own, creating on our own, just trying to think our way into being a certain way. No, we need models and we need relationships and trusted guides, which is why therapy works best when you trust the person across from you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're social creatures, and we're constantly connecting to other humans. And also, again, this piece that gets really missed, especially in our modern day society, to the world that we live in.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you talking about ecotherapy in this way. And even if folks, even if that's not what you're looking for in a therapist, ecotherapy per se, I hope that this episode just helps you start to get curious about it and find little ways, because it can be overwhelming when you're not used to looking at things in this way. But if you find little ways, like you said, Zara, whether it's like a rock that you find interesting, bring it into your home, or the colors of the leaves on the trees, or the way that the tree branches twist and turn, and just notice. You're just bringing curiosity into your life. Mindfulness is literally just noticing anyway. So noticing within itself helps reduce some of the tension in your nervous system. And then when you're ready, you reach out to someone like Zara and you ask them to help you to navigate this really, really complex and intricate and amazing world that we live in, that I think, still know so little about.
Yeah. And I would say, like, if you're someone who's never connected in this way and they're curious of just like a place to start, I think like that thing that I was saying of like, wherever you are, if you're in an urban city, if you're in a rural setting, like, go for a 5 or 10 minute walk around, see if there's something in nature that catches your eye, and journal about it or meditate about it or create some art about it, right? Like, just be curious about what is it in there, and see what comes from that, right? Like, that actually might just be a nice little taste test of what can come from these types of practices.
I love that. Can we actually talk a little bit about body stories? What does that mean? What does it look like? Can you kind of walk us through a story made up?
Yeah. I mean, I think like, a big one that we work with is an I am broken, right? Oftentimes when we are working with folks with chronic illness or chronic pain, we are hearing a narrative of like, my body is broken, I am broken. And so, if we're working with someone, that is their problem saturated narrative. And we want to work with them to explore the ways that they can connect to a more empowering, strength-based narrative. And so what does that look like? And so, I think there's ways to, first of all, just like externalize our problem saturated narrative, to look at it outside of ourselves and to see what it looks like and feels like, to hold that story and where that story comes from and the weight of it. And then to start to think about the times that like there is a unique outcome to that story, when that isn't the only story I hold about myself. And what does that look like? And what does that look like to expand that? That's one thing in it. I also think, like, for instance, we get fixated, or there's oftentimes a fixation on stories around brokenness or not enoughness, and also this idea that our bodies hold a lot of things, not just what doesn't feel good or what is creating pain or what is creating illness. And so how do we also connect to that within our body. So our bodies also hold all our emotions, and wow, what a gift. Even if these emotions sometimes feel really hard, or, my body has a lot of ways it can't work. And also, like, for me, one area that doesn't have pain for me a lot is my feet, right? And so my feet can hold me. And that is something that I'm able to connect to and change my body story around just being a broken thing to like, here's something that is very rooted and grounding and works. And so like my body is not just a broken thing. And so that's part of what that looks like. And so we help folks kind of connect to, first of all, what is this problem saturated narrative we carry about our body? And then what is the story we want to hold? And also, how do we create that process, right? Like, one of the things that started the invitation is we were thinking about like tattoos, scars, piercings, like all cuts, all these different things that hold a lot of stories for us. And so even just understanding the stories within that and helping folks unpack that.
I think, yeah, stories are so important, which is also a part of art. They're where we've lost. We have no ability to story tell. That just has completely gone by the wayside. It doesn't feel important to people to just sit by a fire and to just tell stories. Like, it's not productive. It's not getting shit done. And so therefore it got lost somewhere.
Yeah.
Which means then when we have a story in our head, it stays there because we don't know how to create and build other stories.
Yeah.
But I really like that concept of your body story. And I think that's why the and is so important, because I think, again, going back to like this singular story, which actually we just talked about that on a previous episode, but the single story of like this one story in your head. And so I'm thinking, I work a lot with like young adults and their parents, and the parents have this one story in their head of like, here's what you need to do to get better. And then the young adult or the child has the story of, but I can't get better. Like, and that's that. And so then there's this battle when really all either one of those people want is to connect in their relationship. It has nothing to do with what their body can or can't do.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we just have these single stories, and I think that the art of storytelling, there's a book I'm in the process of reading. I'm going to get the title. And it's all about the art of storytelling and how it's so important, to teach kids how to tell stories. I mean, to tell stories to kids to help them learn about life and lessons, because kids learn through play and they learn through imagination.
Yeah.
And these days we're, showing ABC flashcards to kids at like 1, and it's like, they don't need that. They're going to learn to read just fine.
Totally.
We need to be telling stories and interacting and playing. And we've just lost, I think there's such a discomfort. Again, I mean, even for me, like, I have to relearn how to do these child things as an adult, because that is not comfortable for me. So it's hard. But
one thing with like stories and like being able to hear our stories outside of ourselves and then understand that like, oh, this is a story I'm telling, right? Like, this actually isn't the only way to think about this situation, or this isn't the only way to see what's in front of me. Because if we don't kind of express our stories, we think they're the truth, right? And our thoughts are not always true.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. It's like, it seems counterintuitive to people, but even with like, say, angry behavior, when you let your child have an outlet for punching or hitting or kicking, it actually reduces the risk of them hurting somebody else. So same thing with telling stories and lying, and the more we can be creative and allow ourselves to tell stories, and then the less you're going to have someone lying about something, because there was this outlet for that thing that was stored up inside of them.
Yeah.
The book is called Healing Stories for Challenging Behavior by Susan Perrow, Perrow. It's very, very long and filled with stories. So that's a great book if anyone's looking to hear more about like storytelling. Is there anything else that you wanted to share today?
Oh my gosh, so much. No, I mean, I think, I will say if you are someone who already does connect to these types of things and are creating in your own ways about it, my co-creator, Pam, who I created this scene with, we are working on edition of it where we are asking more folks who are artists and creators who have talked or worked through their own processes of connecting or even reclaiming their body stories through connecting to nature, through art, words, movements, image making. We are collecting submissions, and so I can send you the link for folks to send that over. We also have like some practices available of even just kind of a little booklet that offer some kind of just prompts to help folks in connecting to nature and creative prompts as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So you'll send me a link for that?
I'll send you a link for that. Yes, absolutely.
Great. All right, Zara, thank you so much. Definitely send me the link for the zine below so people can send in their submissions and anything else that you want to add there.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Zara. See you next time.
If you learned something new today, consider writing it down in your phone notes or journal and make that new neural pathway light up. Better yet, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, email me, or leave a voice memo for us to play on the next show. The way you summarize your takeaways can be the perfect little soundbite that someone else might need in order to better absorb the same lesson. Lastly, leaving a review really helps others find this podcast, so please do so if you found this episode helpful.